Okay, everybody, welcome to our last lesson for the week, Resistance and Reform in India. So today we'll be taking a look at some forms of resistance to British rule in India, and then how India tried to reform itself and tried to push for some reforms in terms of British rule and things like that. So our objectives and standards: to explain the Sepoy Mutiny, analyze the outcome of the Sepoy Mutiny, explain the rise of nationalism in India, and evaluate how the British tried to address the rise of nationalism in India. Take a moment here to read over the standards, if you would, please. And our desired result is: how did Indians resist and reform? So, struggles in India. By 1850, Great Britain controlled most of India. There were areas, however, of discontent and frustration, though, within the Indian population. Many Indians felt that the British were trying to convert them to Christianity. Again, just very similar to how many Africans felt in terms of imperialism. And others were upset with the racism that was being expressed towards them. In 1857, gossip spread that the cartridges that the sepoys were the sepoys were using, my apologies, the sepoys were using were greased with beef and pork. Now, many Indians and many sepoy soldiers, of course being Indians, typically tended to be Hindu or Muslims. For those who don't know, Hindus are not allowed to eat beef according to their religion, and Muslims do not eat pork according to their religion. So many Hindus and Muslims who were sepoy soldiers felt it offended their religion. So soldiers disobeyed to use the cartridges because you had to bite the cartridge to open the package, to put the ball and the powder into the rifle, and of course that flavor would get in your mouth, again going against their religion. Those sepoy soldiers who refused were thrown in jail. Now, because of this, other sepoy soldiers rebelled and marched to Delhi in India, where they captured the city. The rebellion quickly spread to other parts of the country, and both sepoys and British soldiers tried to slaughter the other side. This was a very bloody resistance, a very bloody movement, and it would take over a year before the country would return to a sense of calm. Finally, the British government sent troops to help the East India Company. Remember that the East India Company pretty much controlled most of India without the British government's help. So the British government finally had to step in excuse me, to help bring about peace and restore the country. So here's a picture of the Sepoy Rebellion. You can see, just how, violent, and you can kind of tell by the facial expressions of both sides here how fierce the fighting was in terms of the Sepoy Rebellion. Now, a time of change. Now, the Indian population was too weak to fight against the British. There were also divides between those who were Hindu and those who were Muslim. So again, some religious elements didn't allow the Indian group to unite fully to kind of fight back against the British. Remember, kind of the same problem in Africa, where they were unable to unite to unite with each other. So the Indians were also unable to do this as well. In 1858, Great Britain, the British government, took direct control of the Indian country. And this time period of rule then becomes known as the Raj. This is a time period of rule of by the British government in India. And this will last for about a few hundred years or so. So the Raj lasted from 1757 until 1947 in India. Again, what didn't necessarily mean that the British government was in control the whole time. It could have been the East India Company. But again, it's a time of British control in India from 1757 until 1947. There was a cabinet minister in London who directed policy, and a British Governor General, later known as the Viceroy, would carry out the orders of the British government in India. Now, the British did promise India that the country would remain free and independent and able to make their own decisions, but gradually Great Britain would expand control over the area. So making demands. Starting in the early 1800s, Indians began making demands for more modernization and control in governing themselves. Ram Mohan Roy, a modern-thinking, educated Indian, began a movement that moved Indians away from traditional practices and ideas, again, trying to move more towards modernization in hopes that the British government would kind of back out of India that way to see that the India was modernizing. So he is considered the father of modern India. Indians felt like they were treated as second-class citizens. They were prevented from top positions in the Indian civil service, and those Indians that did receive higher positions in terms of government positions were often paid less than the British. So these concerns led to the rise of nationalism, or India trying to kind of reform and form its own country in the nation. Now, there's going to be two groups for Indians, two groups that formed in support of nationalism. The first one was in 1885, and this was the Indian National Congress. Again, later on, in 1906, there'll be the Muslim League. Now, both groups will fight for specific concerns of their groups, but later they're going to look for self-government rights in terms of, hey, we can rule ourselves. We don't need the British government ruling us or making our decisions. We're able to control ourselves. Now, the Bengal province. The Bengal province was an example of an area that was too large to be administered by the British. So the British divided the area up into a Hindu section and a Muslim section. Now, violence and terrorism broke out as a result of this. The British then later backed the order in 1911 and divided the area up in a different manner. And because of this, the British and the people of India will continue to struggle over control in India for the next half century or so, and we'll learn more about how India becomes independent from Great Britain later on in the course. So our closure, how did Indians resist and reform? In what ways did they resist British control? And what were some ways that they tried to reform or make changes to bring about the ending of imperialism in India? All right. So I hope you have a good rest of your day or night. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you soon.